Peace, power, and prosperity. Peace, power, and prosperity. This is how you feel, Shamsuddin. Really, you feel Balogun. Also, Shamsuddin. I wanted to kind of jump on here and talk about a few of the elders that have transitioned and have gone on and have passed away here recently over the past few years. If you can do me a big favor, if you can like, share, and subscribe to my channel, that would be absolutely great. That would be great and be absolutely helpful. I would really appreciate that. My comrades really appreciate that. Eric Cafe would appreciate. Some others would appreciate that because they do take the time out to assist and come talk about a number of different issues on spiritual and political. And so they would definitely appreciate you if you would like, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification button, and just in general support. Keep in mind, not only are we speaking on this platform, but we also are in the community actively, almost daily, trying to bring about support and bring about the betterment of the community through direct action. So that's something that we believe in. Um, Definitely feel free to support. My cash app is CMB Dallas. That's Charlie Mike Bravo Delta Alpha Lima Lima Alpha Sierra CMB Dallas. Okay. Uh, Feel free to support in that way because we got a couple of events that's in line, and we plan on being in the community all 2024. And if you don't do anything else, you can definitely subscribe and just sort of follow along our progress throughout the year 2024 and whatnot. If the Most High say the same, that's basically that's what the plan is essentially. But I'm Yafeuh Balogun. I'm a street reporter. I try to be in the streets, and part of being in the streets is speaking to elders. And these particular elders I've mentioned, Charles Beasley, Fahim, Minkah, Charles Hillman, who was some great comrades, elder comrades, I should say. They were not my equal. In fact, they were greater than myself and greater than those that are currently working in the community. We're attempting to work to be similar to them, but we may not ever be exactly like them, but we're working currently. Uh, in my conversation with the elders, man, it's my whole position is I do more listening than I do speaking. Because they talking from experiences. Some of those experiences were inside of prison, as in the case of Charles Beasley, who spent a number of different years in prison. I think one stint was about 12 years. He spent in prison. Um, and he always had a story about that, and he talked about being in prison in Canada and not having, basically them providing him like a slop bucket to defecate in, to use the restroom in, and talked about the extreme cold that was that he had just being in prison during that time. The minus, I want to say he was in Quebec, um, in Canada, is being locked up, and did some time there, and talked about other inmates there and how the guards mostly spoke French and him only speaking English. Charles Beasley was from Dallas, um, from this area in Dallas, and didn't know nothing about. I don't assume he didn't know anything about Canada up until the point that he was in prison there. And allegedly, and I stress the word allegedly, he hijacked a plane, um, and was attempting to take it over to Cuba, or desired to take it to Cuba, but ended up taking it to Canada more so. and you know, forced to surrender in Canada and began to serve time in Canada. That's how Mr. Beasley ended on August 19th, 1968. Well, I should say a couple of weeks later, a little while later, um, allegedly a plane hijacking. But all of that is not as important as to the mentorship that was given by these three gentlemen. Just like you and I, everybody has their errors, and of course, we can be critical on certain levels. However, what I did learn about these men, at least later on in life, Charles Hillman included, was that these men were dedicated family men. And my father was a dedicated family man as well. And just observing, and now me getting a little bit up in age, I'm not an old man, but kind of sort of in the middle. And now I can see the value of just being a dedicated family man. When I mean being a dedicated family man, I mean just trying to stay consistent, take care of your wife, your kids, that sort of thing. And if you got them, your grandkids. Of course, I don't have grandkids yet, but I definitely do understand sort of kind of the example that these men had left. Now, um, I spoke at Mr. Beasley's funeral, and being honest with you, I was surprised he passed away. It was sort of all of a sudden, it wasn't like sometimes you have people that pass away and they sort of break down slowly. And if he had a breakdown slowly, he didn't necessarily show us that he broke down slowly. And I don't think too many folks was aware of it, but I guess a week or two before, his wife actually passed, and he took care of his wife like no husband ever took care of their wife. Best believe. And I remember him just always pushing her because she was in a wheelchair, so he always used to push her, and they would come to events and whatnot, and always was just present, and I always was a mentor. I always was talking. That's what I take from Mr. Charles Beasley, and I was happy to know him, and I got a chance to really meet him uh, in the early 2010s. That's when I met him at an event that we put together for another comrade of theirs who we had brought into town to speak about his life and his works. So he was there. And Mr. Fahim Minkah was there, and I remember, and I say it all the time, going to school with Mr. Fahim Minkah's children, at least two or three of his daughters. I went to school with, and I just remember him dropping them off in elementary school, dropping them off at school, and sometime later realizing that through my research, realizing that he was at that time the coordinator of the Black Panther Party here in the city of Dallas. And I was like, hey, I've been knowing him, or of him, I should say. I've been knowing of him since a kid, at least seeing him drop his daughters off at school, seeing him volunteer his time to some programs at the school, and later hearing about programs that he actually had for the community. I spent a lot of time in 2016, 17, 18 talk with Mr. Fahim Minka. Spent a lot of time talking with him about his experience, and he told me about a group that him and Mr. Beasley ultimately were a part of called A-Man. That's African American Men Against Narcotics. And he would kind of tell me some of the things that he went through, and of course, I would just really just listen. We'd be on the phone for an hour and a half, 2 hours sometimes, just talking, just him really breaking it down of his perspective. And I can honestly say I don't necessarily agree with everything that a person say, but I can understand that where they come from and that their heart was in it. And these guys, uh, Fahim, Minkah, Charles Beasley, Charles Hillman, was really about the people their entire life. They was doing this before I was born, and when I came to understand what was going on with the works that they was doing about later on, they was still doing the work, obviously in different capacities other than the Black Panther Party, the original Black Panther Party. But let's take Mr. Hillman for example. He was over an organization called the Friends of the MLK Center in Dallas. And the Friends of the MLK Center was an organization that Mr. Hillman, I assume he started, or very much so a part of, but he definitely led. And it was about supporting the Martin Luther King Center, which is in South Dallas, which is South Dallas is large in African American community, Black community, Moor community. He whatever terminology you use, Mr. Hillman was over that, and it was for the benefit of us. And every so often, for one reason or another, he would invite me to come down, or I would come and I would sit in this meeting, and we would talk about a number of different things. And one thing he always stated, he said, one day, he said, we're going to be gone. And he always talked about at some point in the future that he was going to transition. But I didn't realize that sometime later, years later, that I would actually visit him on his deathbed in the hospital off Colorado Street, off what is that? Out there in Colorado. I can't think of the name of the hospital. I want to say Methodist, but I'm not sure. But I didn't know that I would visit him in that condition. But I told him he was still kind of there, but he wasn't there. You know how it is when someone's in the process of dying. But I did tell him that we was gonna keep the fight, and I'm sure he heard me. And I'm sure he understood. And though he wasn't able to say his standard all power to the people statement that he always gave, uh, he was able to at least look at me. And I know that the body struggles against death oftentimes in the process, and so that was what he was going through. But I did let him know that we're gonna keep the fight, and I intend to keep the fight. I think for the remainder of my life, in some fashion, might not be a militant way, might not be a more direct way, but it will be in a way that benefits the lives of future generations. And I think that's what he was able to do. That's the reason why he committed himself um, to the Martin Luther King, Friends of Martin Luther King. He did so many other things, working cultural organizations and whatnot. Um, Mr. Minkah started A Man, and his objective was to patrol the community and get rid of drug dealers. And I'm talking about late '80s time frame. And keep in mind, he was probably 50 years old this time, but he was very active out in the community fighting against drug dealers. And you remember, if you grew up in the '80s and '90s, the whole thing about saying no to drugs. So that was like the dominant theme in a lot of communities was dealing with kind of internal conflicts. In the '60s, it was about holding the power structure accountable for its lack of humanity. And then in the '80s, it was about, for the most part, dealing with certain epidemics, particularly the drug epidemic that at those times. That's what happened in the '80s. And that's what the mind state of a lot of the movements were about. particularly on the ground, was trying to stop the drugs. And so, of course, black folks didn't own no planes and no boats or the whatnot, or at least on the industrial level. So we wasn't the ones bringing it in. So oftentimes, folks like Mr. Minka had to fight it at when it was already in the community. So that's what he was dealing with an organization again called African American Men Against Narcotics. There's a YouTube called Dallas Drug War that I think I know I have it on my on my Facebook page. Yafeuh Balogun Street Reporter page. It's pinned on my pinned up there. But if you want to check that out, you definitely can. Um, but anyhow, I just wanted to talk about those three elders because I think that their name is not mentioned enough. And I wanted to ensure that the comrades that I'm close with sort of echo the sentiment or continue to echo the sentiment of who these gentlemen were, what they was about. And our goal is always to keep their mission alive and pass it forward to the next generation, to our children and people in the community. Um, here, particularly here in the city of Dallas. Of course, I would like to say that we have influence on other parts of the country, which we have had previously in the past. But more importantly, at least for my comrades, my direct comrades, we focus mainly on our community. Some things that we can reach out and touch, and the chances granted the opportunity for us to expand. As in some cases, we have now expanded to supporting folks in Atlanta, Georgia, but just historically speaking, our focus has been large in those same communities that Fahim, Minkah, Charles Beasley, Charles Hillman were fighting in. And there are others that were with them at that time that also fought and still have these same type of programs that are in existence. But I speak of these three gentlemen just because they have transitioned and have physically expired, and but their mission, of course, is still alive with us today. Peace, power, and prosperity. Peace, power, prosperity. Do me a big favor if I hadn't said it. I can't say it enough. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. You know, if you hadn't, if you know somebody, have them subscribe, share it, because a lot of folks, you know, and I'm speaking of this generation, a lot of folks don't talk about elders that they had direct interactions with. You hear about, they talk about folks that they didn't know, and and I don't ultimately think it's nothing wrong with putting certain folks that you on a pedestal, but you didn't necessarily know them. Like what is your lineage? What are some ideas that you follow from people that you know? That's the important thing, and that is learned a lot of times through ATR, African traditional spiritual systems. Is it talks about people that you knew, ancestors. You had to be related to them. You had to know them, that sort of thing. Your particular ancestors is what's important. So, technically speaking, those that were active in this community are the ones that which we follow closely, which is uh, which is the reason from my perspective of what's important. So I intend to hold these guys alive, and I challenge you to really look for the elders in your community that have been working in your community and get with them and take their experiences and learn from their mistakes, learn from their progress. All of this is extremely important. Peace, power, prosperity. Like, share, subscribe. Yafeuh Balogun, Street Reporter. We're gonna be in the community tomorrow, so I'll be going live tomorrow in the community. If you want to donate, dollar sign CMB Dallas. He with us.